You know the feeling. We've all been there. You get into it with your partner, you go to bed angry, and then you just toss and turn all night. It feels like a law of nature, right? A bad day has to equal a bad night. But is that what the science actually says? Well, a recent study decided to find out. So for this explainer, we're diving into a fascinating study from the journals Sexuality and Culture. It's called The Impact of Daily Romantic Relationship Stress on Sleep. And it was really designed to test our most common assumptions about how love, stress, and sleep are all tangled together. And this is the big question. We feel like it does. I mean, we tell our friends it does. It just seems so obvious that a stressful fight with the person you're closest to would mess with something as fragile as sleep. But, researchers wanted to see if the cold, hard data actually backed up that feeling. Which brings us to the core idea they wanted to put to the test. The seemingly simple link between a stressful day for your relationship and a really rough night of sleep. Okay, so the researchers came in with 3 really clear predictions. First, that any kind of stressful relationship day was going to hurt your sleep. Second, the more intense that stress was, the worse you'd sleep. And third, if you're someone who already has a lot of general anxiety about your relationship, well, that was just going to pour fuel on the fire. Makes perfect sense, right? So to test these ideas, they didn't just, ask people how they felt. Nope. They designed a pretty clever experiment using some modern wearable tech. Let's break down exactly how they did it. The study looked at 36 undergraduate college students who are all in romantic relationships. And this is a really key group because this is a time of life that's often focused on forming these incredibly important bonds. It's also, let's be honest, a time filled with all sorts of other stressors that can mess with your sleep. So for 2 full weeks, 14 days straight, the researchers tracked these students day and night. And that 2-week window is so crucial because it captures the natural rhythm of life, right? It gets the stressful weekdays and the more chilled out weekends. And they collected data from 3 different angles, which is super smart. They used Oura rings to get objective, hard data on things like sleep time and efficiency. Then they had the students keep morning diaries to capture their subjective feeling of how they slept. And finally, every single evening, students filled out a survey about any relationship stress they'd had that day. Okay, let's get into the results because this is where everything we think we know kind of gets turned on its head. The data was not at all what the researchers, or frankly, most of us, would have ever predicted. All right, here's the first huge surprise. Remember that first hypothesis that a stressful day with your partner would tank your sleep? Well, the study found it didn't. On the days students reported relationship stress, there was no significant change in their sleep data, objective or subjective. That daily fight just wasn't the sleep killer they thought it would be. And honestly, it gets even weirder. When they looked at the intensity of the stress, the results were almost paradoxical. On days with more intense stress, participants actually had slightly more efficient sleep and spent a tiny bit less time awake after they fell asleep. Now, these effects were really small, but they were the complete and total opposite of what everyone expected. So if a one-off fight or a super high-stress day doesn't actually ruin our sleep, then what does? Well, the study did find one factor, one thing that made all the difference. And the answer wasn't the daily weather, but the long-term climate of the relationship. Researchers looked at something called trait relationship stress. Think of it as the general background level of anxiety and stress a person feels in their relationship all the time. It's not the acute flare-up, it's the chronic tension. And this is where it all clicked. For people who had high levels of this background trait-level stress, a stressful day did hurt their sleep. On average, they took over 8 minutes longer to fall asleep on the days they had some kind of relationship stressor. And that impact was cumulative. For these same high-anxiety people, every little point of increase in stress intensity on a given day was linked to a loss of about 2.5 minutes of total sleep. It just goes to show that when the foundation is already stressed, every new crack, no matter how small, takes a real toll. So, what does this all mean? Why is this difference between a daily spat and this chronic tension so important? Let's look at the key takeaways from all this. Well, this suggests a few really powerful ideas. First, the real sleep killer isn't the occasional argument, it's that ongoing chronic tension. This might mean that couples who have healthy ways to resolve conflict are actually protecting their sleep, even on the bad days. It's also possible that for these young couples, the overall health of their relationship just acted as a buffer
Of course, the researchers are quick to point out that other big stressors, like exams or work, weren't measured, and those definitely play a huge role too.
And that leaves us with this final thought to chew on. When it comes to your sleep, maybe it's not about trying to avoid every single daily storm. Maybe what truly matters is the long-term climate that you and your partner create together. Something to sleep on.